Yeah, that was a one of the McFarlane toys that somebody brought in and just had it. And so I would do a lot of that. I would retrofit uh, existing things and turn it into something else. Do a lot of kit bashing, and uh, so that was that those particular. It was a very small McFarlane guy that was being electrocuted. He wasn't much more than 8 inches tall, but in the movie they appear to be hundreds of feet tall, and there was only one of them. But we lined it up and lit it in such a way that we could do some shots with like a half a dozen of these things being electrocuted, and they're part of the narrative that's kind of explaining how this later on these guys that we ended up calling the shitmen were produced. And there was like the whole film is about process, different kinds of processes, that one thing has to happen that leads to another thing. And so what you're watching is something you don't know where it's going, but when you finally land, you go, oh, that's what that process was all about, was how the shipment were made, or the assassin character, when you see the final thing, um, goes through a character arc where he's totally transformed into something completely different. And and uh, and so yeah, everything was really informed by my understanding of process.
Mm, right. I'm going to jump to a different behind the scenes photo. Just give me a second. Um, this is this is someone more like on an operating table with tubes coming out of it. And This is pretty funny how we're describing the action. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that was for when we were doing Kickstarters for the second Kickstarter, and that was an
Mm-hmm.
operating scene. So what happens in the movie, you'll see, is like, I think at the end of part two, um, uh, the assassin is setting a bomb that doesn't go off and is grabbed by one of the denizens and drug away. And that's the end of part two. And then we got to part three. It begins with a theater and a small audience in a small theater, and the red theater drapes move away, and you see this shadowy uh, character, like this doctor, and on the operating table is a actor that was dressed up uh, in the costume of the character of the assassin. And that's another kind of a Zeman trick that I used a lot. Was I built a costume of the stop motion puppet. The stop motion puppet was a foot tall, GI Joe scale. I built the most of the world around 1/6 scale, because then I could buy a lot of stuff and not have to fabricate things. I could buy GI Joe stuff and whatnot, and so that allowed me, to do things relatively inexpensively. And
Mm.
so then the curtain opens. That shot took, um, the opening shot took me about a week to figure out. And what it was that I shot the characters on a stage on a platform, and got two pieces of visqueen, big, semi-opaque, semi-translucent, like what they use for drop cloths, when you're painting, and had that stretch. And then I had those on frames that wiggled and moved, really big frames, like 20 by 20 or 30 or whatever. And then I had the visqueen very not attached very well, and I had two people off camera hitting the visqueen, so it would create a vibration, um, and so it broke up the image. I'm always looking for breaking things up or burning things, and pushing materials to the limits to see what will happen. And so from there, I think the shot that you're talking about, the camera booms down, and this is in the part 3. And that was a miniature that I built 30 years ago and shot 30 years ago with a motion control camera. And then I built a set duplicating that. I was going to pull the Carl Zeman thing and switch to a live action scene. And Tom Gibbons, one of the stop mo animators, is really skinny. And so I covered him in plastic bandage, and I made a static figure of the assassin after he had been anesthetized, and only his eyeball moves. And the assassin finds that it's in an operating room, like a horrible little operating room. It's more like Dr. Mengele. It's like more a torture. We call it the Charnel Hospital. And then I got 2 people that worked for me, my assistant Nikita and one of the compositors, Satish. And Satish played a doctor, and I got the doctor's outfit and mask and everything for him. And then Nikita was a nurse, and I got a mask for her, and I started shooting. The guy that was really helpful doing the cinematography was Chris Morley. And we spent on weekends about a month of doing tests. Initially, we started to shoot, and it just looked terrible. It just looked like a really bad overlit sitcom from Days of Our Lives or something like that from the 60s. And so we just worked it. We just kept working it. And the system I came up with was a derivative of some of the Japanese horror movies, where they would shoot people in reverse, and then time stretch or cut out frames or whatever, so that they're all kind of jangly. And what I had now, these people are non-actors, so and I'm used to working with puppets, so I treated them like puppets and had them rehearse. Say the nurse has to pick up a scalpel, and so I would have Nikita reach in and pick up a scalpel and exit the frame, and I would have her do it like 20 times until it became muscle memory for her. And then when we would go to shoot, I would have her or Satish do that same action after rehearsing a lot backwards as slow as they possibly could. And there was no way they could maintain the center of gravity or and keep concentrating on the moves that they had to do. And then super slow. And for like a 4-second shot, it might take a minute or a minute and a half. And then we take that and reverse it and speed it back up. So it fell more into a 20 to 18 frame range. And that's how we found the look that seemed to fit the Mad God world. It's like, it's not realistic. It's just another kind of a mind space.